Alright guys, so in this video we're checking out the NewBeeDrone Invisi360. I'm not going to cover any of the specs. If you guys are interested in the specs, I'll put some of them up on here. Click on the link to the product page if you want more details on all the little specs. I'm going to talk more about like what this is like to fly and who this is going to be good for and who is this not really going to be good for, and all the little quirks that I found about this particular model while I've been flying around for the last few weeks. And I think those are going to be more interesting than the reading off the specs. So 3-inch props here, 2004 motors, running this on 4S, and you can see I'm running 2 batteries here. I'll talk about the battery setup here in detail shortly. Running the Vista system here. It's digital DJI. I believe it's only DJI. I might be mistaken on that. Check the product link. I don't think there's an analog version of this, but obviously this is the Ghost drone, or the 360 drone. I guess they're not exactly sure what they call it these days. The X-Night 360, and I think there was another one that I reviewed from Rob FPV, are based on 5-inch propellers, much larger footprint than this. This is about the similar footprint to like a Squirt or some other 3-inch Cinewhoop that's out there, but of course this is for 360 video, and we've got the Insta360 1R camera in here, the 360 camera with a 360 mod, no battery. It is running off of a BEC, and I'll show you here that in a second. Got to talk about that as well. And you see lens on top, and of course lens on the bottom, and of course this makes flying this without damaging the lenses on the bottom, landing of course somewhat challenging. I just put towels down on the ground and grassy areas, and that seems to be okay, and lens is okay. Now, they do provide these little lens guards. These are a NewBeeDrone product that come on. You basically stick it on to the main lens with some like a sticky adhesive, and they give you like 4 of those. It's very difficult to get that on. I actually ruined one when trying to put it on, so be very careful when you attempt to put the sticky adhesive on the lens guard and then put that on the 360 mod. It's very challenging to get it correct, but that's on there to make sure that it doesn't fall off in flight, because the TPU mounting here doesn't really hold that lens guard in place. It just holds the camera in place. So the camera is powered off of a BEC that converts the power. Yeah, it's like almost impossible to see here. It's buried in the back, and it's right there. You can barely see that little plug right there. So there's a plug that is going into that BEC board, which is actually, the BEC board's actually on the main BEC board's on the side here. So there's a plug over here, right there, that JST plug right there. That goes into another JST plug that's on another board that goes into the USB-C port of the 1R camera, and that powers the camera while you're in flight. And my model, when I got it first, I was flying it around, and it turned on, obviously powered on, and the camera was recording. I took off. When I landed, the camera had no power, and that happened a few times, and I was like, and I got no video recording, of course, out of that. I was like getting kind of frustrated, and it turns out that this little plug that's right here, which you can barely see, was a little bit, like, just a tiny bit crooked and not all the way plugged in, and I'm pretty sure that was vibrating out while I was in flight and causing the power to be lost. So I plugged it in all the way, make sure it was nice and secure and nice and straight, and then after that I had no problems with the power to the camera. That seemed to work. But if you have similar issues, you may want to double check that connector there, make sure that that is not being pulled on in any way. That connector there goes to these wires here, and it goes to the side over here, and into here into this BEC board that converts the battery power into 5 volts for the 1R camera. So something to be aware of. And you can see here that basically the camera is a permanent install. You have this TPU part here with all these screws to hold the camera in on the bottom, and that is likewise the same on the top. And so I had to remove all these screws to pull the TPU part off, put the camera in. You have to put you have to take this whole TPU part off, you have to put the camera in an angle so that you can get that little board there with the USB-C plug plugged in, and then it's a very tight fit. You have to basically get the camera in settled in, and then put the TPU port back on to secure the camera in place. And so it's a bit fiddly, a bit tricky to get all that in there. Yeah, but it's basically like a permanent install in my opinion. It's like you can, obviously take the camera if you want to later, but I'm going to leave it in here for as long as I'm going to have this model, because I don't use this camera for any other 360 purposes, because I have the Insta360 One X2 camera now, so I actually wasn't even using this. So I'm just going to be using this on this drone exclusively, which is fine that it's in here like this. Now, if you need access to the micro SD card, which is again permanently installed basically in this setup, they do offer you this USB port right here that you can plug into. And so basically you plug that in, plug it into your computer, do have to power the camera on, and it goes through all this little beeps and whatever device detection, and then it'll show up as a USB port or a USB device, and then the micro SD card will show up as a drive letter on your computer, assuming that all your USB drivers are working properly. On one of my computers I had a USB driver problem and it wasn't showing up until I fixed it, and then once I fixed it, then the card showed up on that one. So be aware that this is how you're going to access that micro SD card without having to dig the camera out of here. They offer you this little port right there, so you can get access to the data and pull it off. That way you can just leave the camera in here. Now, getting the batteries in here is tricky. So these are 520 milliamp hour 4S GNB batteries. Now they recommend I think 660 and 850 4S GNB batteries, which are similar dimension to these, because they have to fit this TPU part here that holds the battery in place. So you're going to need a battery that's a similar dimension to these, the 660 or the 850, and this 520 is similar. It's just that it's not as long, so it doesn't stick out as much. But the dimensions are similar between the 520, the 660, and the 850. Of course, the bigger the battery, the more flight time you're going to get. But be very careful how you plug in and charge your batteries, because if, for example, you have one battery that's full and one battery that's depleted, because it's using this parallel battery setup, because it's basically combining the two batteries in a parallel setup, so that you have, instead of 520 milliamp hours, you can have 1040 milliamp hours combined for the two batteries in terms of energy available to fly it. And if you make the mistake of not having the same battery charge on both batteries, what happens is because of the imbalance, when you plug this in terms of a parallel setup, there's going to be huge current of energy, basically electrons flowing from the higher voltage battery to the lower voltage battery. And depending upon that voltage difference, you could possibly start a fire. So before you plug in one of these, make sure that they're both of the same voltage or approximately very close to the same voltage. Otherwise, you're going to have a serious problem on your hands. So, and they do have a bunch of stickers and stuff on the drone before when you take it out of the box, before you put everything together. They do warn you about that. But again, yeah, make sure that the batteries are of the same voltage. Otherwise, you're going to have a big problem. Now, getting the batteries in and out of here is very fiddly. You can do it. I decided just to leave my batteries in here and just connect up like an extension cable. I built one of these little extension cables for the balance lead, and then I have another one for the XT30, so that I can just plug up one of these batteries into a charger. And I'm just going to leave it in here. Obviously that's going to limit you to like one flight at a time, because getting the batteries in and out here is very fiddly. I think this is one of the gripes I have about this design, is that the battery is not easy to put in and take out. Maybe they can fix that in a future revision. I don't know. But yeah, that's the biggest gripe I have with this model, is basically swapping out the batteries is not easy on this one. Now, in terms of the way the rest of the drone looks, it looks like a typical, 3-inch type of Cinewhoop here with 2004 motors. This, because it's like a ghost drone, it's not really meant for acro, because you can pretty much point the camera wherever you want when you're doing your post-processing. I'll show you some example flights. I've actually done a lot of example flights before. on the previous videos on these 360 drones. So there's not a whole lot more I can show you. Basically, you can, as you're flying along, you can, in post-production, you can point the camera up, down, behind, any direction you want. It's a 360 camera. So, you can make the flight look however you want. It'll look cooler if you're flying like with objects to the right and left and above and below. That usually will give you a cooler looking 360 video as you're flying around. So hopefully I'm showing you some good examples of that here. But yeah, this is a drone for people that want to get that sort of ghost drone footage, 360 drone footage, but with a smaller footprint than what has been previously available in the X-Night 360 or the other options that are out there that can hold a 360 camera. I'm sure that there's a lot of other ones out there that I'm not aware of. I'm sure plenty of people in the comments will educate me on my ignorance. But yeah, this basically is another alternative to those other ones out there with a fairly small footprint and one that you don't have to build. So I think several other ones out there, you do have to build them. I think actually most of the options available out there are build options versus very few are bind and fly options. Like this one in the X-Night 360, as far as I know, are the only bind and fly options available in this category. So you can either go for the bigger one with the 5-inch props and no prop guards, bigger footprint, or you got the smaller 3-inch Cinewhoop type form factor here in this one here, or you have to build it yourself. So if you're in the camp where you don't want to build or don't feel like building, then basically you have this 3-inch option and the X-Night 360 5-inch option, and that's pretty much it. But in terms of how much it weighs, it's pretty similar to a lot of other 3-inch Cinewhoops out there with a GoPro, carrying a GoPro around. It has this parallel battery setup, which is kind of unusual. You're not going to see that in any other 3-inch Cinewhoops out there. But in terms of flight characteristics, in terms of performance, this is for like Cinewhoop flying, not for acro. And doing that kind of stuff with a 360 drone is, in my opinion, kind of pointless. Because it's not really what this is designed for. So if that's what you want, then I would recommend just getting something else that's more designed for freestyle versus something like this. I think this is going to be for a specific purpose, like certain environments that you want to get really interesting footage where you're like basically going through a lot of gaps in different environments and you want to capture that 360 footage, and then this is kind of what you're looking for. So it's a very specific use case in my opinion, so not really for everybody. Now, one more thing that I do have to mention regarding the footage and these little lens guards that are on the top and the bottom, which I believe you really should, I think you should use, otherwise you're going to risk damaging the lenses. I think that doing the calibration of the stitching is going to be kind of tricky. I used a custom calibration, a custom setting, because the pre-built ones didn't really give some good results. And then you get some like lens flaring and some minor chromatic aberrations that don't really get filtered out in certain situations. So you can kind of tell that, and when you're flying through certain areas where the sun's hitting at the right angle, because it is basically the light's being refracted through the lens guard and off of the surface of the lens, then you get some sort of optical aberrations that are difficult to basically get out of there in post-processing. So something to be aware of if you are preferring the best basically the best video footage over protection, then you don't want to be using these lens guards, in my opinion. Then you're going to get the best optical performance out of the lenses, of course, at the risk of damaging the lenses, especially the one on the bottom. And basically, you can't land anywhere except for a specified landing spot that is basically soft and not going to damage that lens on the bottom. That's the one that's the one that's at the most risk. And of course, if you crash, both lenses are at risk because you could land upside down, and depending upon where you land. So those are the downsides of these 360 drones. And I'm sure a lot of you guys that are into 360 drones already know about this, but if you aren't, these are things that you need to be aware of. Okay, I think that's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.